Hello and welcome to Talk Art. I'm Sally Rain and I will be your host as we delve into the world of the artist and the art that's all around us. Talk Art is sponsored by the Silicon Valley Open Studios. During the first 3 weekends in May, hundreds of local artists open our studios to the public. For more information, maps, and dates, you can go to the website svos.org. Our guest for Talk Art, Lessa Bouchard, is a multimedia conceptual artist, and we will be discussing the 4 steps involved in creating a conceptual art play. So welcome, Lessa.
Thank you so much for having me, Sally.
Oh, I'm very interested to find out what is involved in conceptual art.
Well, conceptual art really starts with the idea, the concept, right? So if you have an idea, that is going to then dictate the materials that you use, the medium. So sometimes, if you are struck by an idea and it feels like it should be danced, if it's something to do with movement, you would create a dance piece. If you are someone who is interested in sound, like John Cage, his piece on silence, you would engage with sound and the materials there and express and explore the idea that way.
So tell us a little bit about your background. How did you become a conceptual artist?
Well, my background originally is in theater, and as a kid I worked at the Renaissance Festival, and that really gave me a strong, I guess, foundation in commedia, which is a style of theater that is from the medieval times into the Renaissance. Italian and French troops would go around, and there were these very strong archetypal clown characters that would sometimes make fun of the bigwigs of the day, So it's a fun comedic style. And both myself and one of the partners that I've worked with most recently both have a very strong background in commedia, though she has her training is very French in Molière. The Molière uses that style, and then mine was a little more Italian, like say Dario Fo style. So it's interesting blending the two.
So you start with an idea, and you have a process around that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that varies a bit from medium to medium, but in theater, I lean heavily on an improvisational background, and as does Susie Danzig, who was one of the main collaborators in creating A Moment Unbound, which is the work that I think we're really focusing on right now.
Excellent. Well, you brought some images of your process. Let's take a look at those while you talk.
Okay, great. So I was working at a bookstore downtown in Palo Alto on University Avenue right around the time that Borders closed, and had worked off and on in bookstores my whole life, and had just moved to Silicon Valley and had an artist studio and a ton of books, none of the media equipment that I had had in grad school, and no internet connection, but a ton of books. So I was thinking a lot about my relationship with those. And also this image that you're seeing is a photo from this box of stuff that was given to me by the Friends of the Palo Alto Library. So between my installation of swaying bookshelves, which you saw, well, here it is again, that's good. So if we could stay here for a second. The swaying bookshelves were basically my initial thinking conceptually about the instability of text, the inherent instability of text. This book, The Case for Books by Robert Darnton, came out in 2010 at the time that I created this installation. And so this really, his idea is that text is inherently, information is inherently unstable, that our
Okay.
relationship with information, how we communicate, has consistently changed throughout the ages, and that each time there's a shift, there's a big shift, say
Right.
from oral to written, there's a lot of cultural anxiety. Oh no, it's the end of culture as we
Right.
know it. And then there is a shift from writing to print. Of course, that was very dramatic, caused all kinds of upheaval throughout this is why we have the Protestant movement, you know, I mean, it's because of the advent of print. And then, of course, moving into the 20th century, you have the mass market paperback, which actually dramatically affected how we perform in the theater. You know, Stanislavski's methods of performance were easily accessible to everyone. Previously, that knowledge was reserved for guilds and families. There were family troupes that went around and performed, but all of a sudden you could get an affordable book that gave you these secrets.
Right.
So, you know, there have been massive shifts each time. You know, there's a change in the technology of how we exchange information. So of course now, as we're shifting from the analog to the digital, we're you know, thinking, oh no, what's going to happen? And there are some legitimate concerns, obviously, with you know,
with the idea, you go into then what you call creative research.
Yes, so that's
that's your box of
part
stuff.
of what this really is. It's been an ongoing exploration. The hanging bookshelves, which sway, you know, and then the stuff found in the books donated to the Friends of the Library.
Where did those come from? Those really came from books?
Yes, so these are all pieces of material that were found in...
that people left there?
Yeah, in the books donated to the Friends of the Library.
Oh,
and in fact, I've just purchased this Wallace Stegner that happens to have a letter from Wallace Stegner to the person that had previously owned this book.
Oh my goodness.
So
they left it in there.
Yeah, they stashed it in here, and what I'm assuming happened is that, you know, the previous owner probably passed away, and the books were donated, and nobody ever knew that the letter was here.
Yeah.
So there are all kinds of things like that. I found one letter it was a book about Shakespeare and the law, and I pulled out this letter that was in this book, and it was from the author to Professor Gunther at Stanford. I looked at the name and I said, Jerry Gunther, I know that name. One of the fellow artists at Coverly.
Wow.
It was from her husband's library. It was one of his former students. He taught constitutional law at Stanford. So there were all these really fascinating little special moments. It was really exciting for me to go back to her and say, hey,
how did that contribute to your research for this piece then?
So, okay, so as, you know, we were finding these lovely things in this box and finding things ourselves at the library, I applied to Fool's Fury in San Francisco. It's an ensemble theater company. I have been doing drop-in workshops there, and they had a play development series. I suggested that I had this box of stuff and these swaying bookshelves and you know, this character work that I had done in the past, performance art character, and these friends that agreed to sign on and collaborate with me, and they said yes. So they gave us the opportunity to try out some of the work that we were generating from, you know, there was one of the books that we found was from the Jersey Shore, and it just so happens that Susie Danzig is from New Jersey. It was just one of these random kind of interesting serendipitous coincidences, and also there's this lovely Lucy the Elephant postcard sorry.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the Lucy the Elephant here from New Jersey. So, you know, these little bits and pieces started to work themselves into the world of this play. We came up with the swaying bookshelves, and all of this ephemera became the World Archive, where these archivist sisters are sorting through things and trying to decide what to keep and what to let go of. And you know, some of it is rather absurd because making those decisions can be so overwhelming, and it gets at, you know, all kinds of ideas about, you know, with contextualization, you know, like finding this letter in this particular book. If I take that letter out,
it's
it
not nearly
doesn't
as
have
much
the same meaning, right? So context, you know, what does it mean to move things?
So as part of the grant proposal that you received, then you went about and you sort of did parts of the play.
So that what they gave us was the opportunity to perform pieces of what we were writing and try them out in front of an audience in San Francisco at the No Space, and then twice. First, you know, we did the first 15 minutes, and then we did another 15 minutes, and then about 6 months into the process, we did the whole first act at the ACT.
So you have some images of that.
Yeah, so we have just a little bit of documentation of the process. So if we could, so yeah, so that's us workshopping, Evan, Michael Kokila Schumacher, and myself at the Dragon Theater, workshopping along the way, because then when the Dragon heard that we were doing this process in San Francisco, they were familiar with myself and with Susie's work at the time, and they were just starting their second stages series, so they gave us a deadline, which was amazing, a spot in their second stage series. So here we are at the No Space, trying out, you know, the archivist characters, sorting through books, and I think there's Susie with, there's a sprite actually, a book sprite behind the bookshelves, you know, sort of giving her a little clue, helping her find things, and that's myself as Ella at the No Space. And so this is a little bit of a collage of the various writers that were involved in the process. So that's Evan, myself, Susie Danzig, and Joyce McClure. And there are a couple of other collaborators that aren't pictured, but that gives you a little bit of a
and
sense.
you have a video that shows some of this. So let's watch that too.
Yes. So this is actually documentation from a performance at the Meridian Gallery in San Francisco.
You could do this, or that, or you could do the other thing.
And you can see there where we have the masks, but we haven't developed the whole costume yet. And there are writing prompts where we are interacting with the gallery audience and, you know, setting up bits of ephemera, and they're interacting with the material.
And the costumes are book sprites.
What do you keep? Everything. Tenderness.
If you're not careful, station KFKD will play in your head 24 hours a day, non-stop in stereo.
Cash.
So it looks like you're conducting.
Right. So we're playing with the audience and playing with the text and chance operations. You know, it's sort of an exploration of culture, you know, and the world around us.
Right.
So I love that that's part of your introduction to the show. And, you know, it's interesting to me, too, that it's really an homage to Alison Knowles did a piece called Newspaper Music back, I think, in 2009. And it was really, she was conducting people reading from various newspapers from around the world. And it was right at a time when we were really starting to be concerned about that physical newspaper and seeing the, you know, the decline in subscription rates, and the transition to digital was already, you know, was underway. And so now this is sort of the next step, thinking about this in terms of books as well.
So the result of all of this is what?
Was the play A Moment Unbound, which we performed at Dragon Theater.
Is it a full-length play?
It was a full 2-act play
wow.
that we performed. It was 90 minutes. And I have a kind of a trailer of the documentation from the show that we can watch.
Yeah, let's take a look at that.
Okay.
This is the Unbound Center and the
Ephemerarium. You have to ask. Did you find it?
But you let go.
Did it find you? Any life is achievable.
On my love, Alvin.
What's that?
I found it in a book. And there's something about where and how you find things. What's next to what?
Tuck all this away, and then everyone is free to explore new things without entanglements. Let go, move on. Some things are best forgotten.
So free. I'll find a place for you, Alvin and Ruby. There's a place for everything.
Oh, that's right. Everything has its place. Still, creatures just have to exist in such an organized fashion.
Where do you think all this comes from?
Manual labor. How quaint. Who do you think they are doing this for?
We help them find what they need to find.
Do we?
Yes. What do you mean?
We set them up.
Oh no, we help them find just what they need.
She has a right to know.
Know what? Your version of the truth. You know she doesn't remember any of it.
She's been lying to me. I was supposed to find these.
The only thing in the world that would have stopped her was worrying about us.
I'm going to explore on my own. Did you find it?
What you needed to find.
I hope you find your moment.
Did it fill you in? A glimmer of the past.
A window.
A visit.
A memory.
A moment.
Lovely.
Thank
I
you.
love the costumes and the masks are phenomenal.
Thank you so much.
So tell us a little bit about the creation of the masks and how that all works in with the play itself.
Sure.
It seems like there's lots of bits and pieces everywhere.
Yes.
And they're all brought together in the play.
Yes.
Fascinating.
So when we were working out what the world was with the swaying bookshelves, and it suggested something not quite real, and that had sort of a fantastic sense to it. You know, the woods started creeping in. You know, there's a lot of imagery there with this, you know, this overgrown, the sense of an overgrown and wild library,
Right.
you know. And so I had this dog woman character that I had, you know, been looking at being hidebound, you know, thinking about these conflicting, you know, the animal self versus the body versus the mind kind of
Right.
idea. And so that character transformed into these book sprites, these wild creatures that are made up of book and light and electricity.
Right.
That
So they're book lamps that are on their heads like
yes.
antennae.
Right, right. So you can
I like
see.
that. They're almost bugs.
I guess
and-
if you can see, there's some examples of them to either side of us, where I can kind of, you can see the
Yes.
this this here, maybe. I don't know. There's the antennae.
Yes.
Or what I'm pointing out. But so yeah, these guys right here. So that's a book light, and it's attached to basically what our designers did, our fabricators, because we all work together to really
Right.
design these creatures, is a mask and a fez, which I think is particularly wild. So because we wanted something that had a sort of a quick headpiece that
Right.
could be taken on and off, and that had the quality of maybe the commedia spirit that both Susie and I are accustomed to working with. So this mask feeling really just spoke to us. And so we have these masks, and then we wired them together. And the wire that we have actually incorporated into the masks is actually electrical wire from the Cubberley
Studios where you work?
Cubberley Studios where I work,
Oh, my
because
goodness.
they just happened to be changing out the
Oh, my
electrical
goodness.
system. So I salvaged a ton of electrical wire, and so we worked it into the design of these creatures. And so we wired everything together and cut the fez down so it was more of a hat. Wire, hot glue, layers and layers of various kinds of felt and
you actually used
material.
old books.
And we actually used old books recycled from the Friends of the Library recycling bins. And like this is an old French dictionary, appropriately enough, since Robert Darnton is a French scholar, so I thought that was kind of
There
a
you
nice
go.
homage to him.
Yes.
And
So-
many, many old legal books, too.
So it sounds like you take a lot of symbols and wrap them
Yes.
around each other and put them together into your
Yeah.
concept.
Absolutely.
And
And,
have-
you know, I was thinking a lot about Egyptian mythology as well. Thoth, the god of knowledge and writing, is that the
Oh, yeah, the
ibis.
long-
So I was thinking about the long nose. So my character Jump has a little bit of a longer nose, whereas Susie's character Vertigo is a little stubbier. Some of that was I wanted to go with the really long snout, but ended up thinking, it sort of got in the way of
Right.
our speaking. But it's definitely part of the exploration and
Oh, yeah, the
building up
concept.
of these characters. Yeah.
So what's next?
So in the process of doing this, we also interviewed people. And one of the amazing coincidences that happened was this reference librarian that I met at the Library of Congress last year, who happens to share the name of one of the characters from the play, Thomas Mann. So we had drawn an article, a newspaper clipping out of our box that had a review of one of Thomas Mann's books, right?
Right.
Not
He's
this
a
Thomas
playwright.
Mann.
Yes,
who's
a German playwright.
Well, he wrote The Magic Mountain, and yeah,
Right.
exactly. But this Thomas Mann was a reference librarian at the Library of Congress for 33 years. He has since retired, but he is the author of the Oxford Guide to Library Research, and he agreed to give me a little interview.
And the
last year.
purpose of this is to create
A documentary about, perhaps a documentary series about some of the issues that we explore in the world of the play. So it's sort of a dramaturgical look at those themes. So thinking about what our relationship with books and media is now.
Well, let's watch part of that interview now.
Yeah.
One of the themes I refer to several times in the book is researchers nowadays are so often in the situation of the 6 blind men of India who tried to describe the elephant. You know, one guy grabbed the leg and said the elephant is like a tree. Somebody touched the wall or the side, the elephant is like a wall. Somebody grabbed the tail, you know, the elephant is like a rope. When you do internet searches, you're always in that position. You're getting something quickly, but you don't know what you're not getting. You can't see how many other parts there are and how the parts fit together. And that's where research libraries give you a major advantage in trying to get an overview of the shape of the elephant. We were talking earlier, I was helping one of the scholars back here who was doing a project on human rights in Islam. And if you do a search just in the library's online book catalog. Forget the newspapers, the journals, the dissertations, the conference papers, just books. You get over 500 books on that. And, you know, who can read 500 books? But through other search mechanisms available in a library, you could cut it down to size very quickly. Specifically, right out here in the main reading room, we had 3 encyclopedias on Islam, and all 3 of those had an article on human rights. We had 2 encyclopedias on human rights, and both of those had an article on Islam. So there were 5 different overview articles right off the bat. And just the content of the articles was such that it gives you some reasonable assurance you're not overlooking something really important right to begin with. But equally important, maybe more important, all 5 of these encyclopedia articles had a concise bibliography, you know, a short list of highly recommended sources, not a printout of everything. And if you compared all 5 bibliographies, they all overlapped in recommending one particular book. And 3 of them overlapped in recommending a second book. 3 of them overlapped in recommending another book. And there were at least, I think, 5 others that were recommended by at least 2 of the bibliographies. So instead of having 500 books to read, you've got a way to cut it down so you've only got a handful of the ones that you really want to start with. You cannot do that with Wikipedia. You cannot get a comparative perspective. You only get what's there, and you don't know where that came from in Wikipedia. I don't want to badmouth Wikipedia. It's very useful in many situations. But for scholarship, you can't quote it because the article may be very different, you know, a month from now from what it is today. And you don't know what you're not getting, which a comparative perspective, which is easily available in a good research library, can tell you.
Fantastic. I really look forward to seeing this documentary on from the idea to the conceptual research, the play, and then a documentary about it all.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to working more with that material and to continuing to interview people. And there have been wonderful participants from the community, had great support from Bell's Books in Palo Alto.
Thank you
so much
being on Talk Art.
Thank you
Really
for having
appreciate
me.
it.
I appreciate it. Thanks.